Black History Month approaches, and I don't recall Minnesota being a sanctuary state for slaves as slavery ended. I don't believe that the state of Minnesota was sending for blacks to work in the state and we could take refuge here. I don't believe that at all. I'm not quite sure when Minnesota became a sanctuary state where I feel people who don't have credentials, that means you don't have a work visa or a green card, as they call it, to be in the state, to be a legitimate thing. So when I started to feel targeted and I said I'd call ICE on them, and Ilhan Omar was in office, I believe Ilhan Omar targeted me because she felt that I called the police on innocent people. I thought these innocent people were following me on my Facebook page. They were within 15 seconds sending group messages where people could stand around and be in a spot where I'm at. They could be at a place where I'm going to visit, like the welfare department. Because again, now I'm filing papers. I was going to 2709 Essex, and I was filing child support papers. I did it 4 times. I did it at the recertification, and they said they didn't have the papers, so I took them back, dropped them off at the desk. Tanetta got them. Tanetta said, Sharon, I scanned them and somehow they don't have them. You have to come back. So I went back a 3rd time. This 3rd time when I went back, I was causing holy hell at 2709 Essex because that's how my rent certification was being stalled. So as they were stalling, saying I didn't have paperwork in June, July, and August, when the paperwork finally got counted in August, they were saying, well, we're taking your housing credit. Either you're going to show Shayla's still in high school or Shayla graduated. If Shayla graduated, this is the amount of money you owe for rent. And for me, because Shayla still had 6 months of school left, I didn't think that she graduated. I thought I still qualified for the credit. I reached out to Cooper. And they said, Shayla's in school, but you have to contact Sandberg. And Sandberg has to fill out the papers. And Sandberg said, we don't have that IEP. Whoever you see once a month at the library or wherever you meet her, Sharon, you have to have them get the paperwork that you need. And I could never track down that woman, Michelle Bethke Kelleher, who met me once a month, who had the metal, library card. Remember, Michelle? We did that deal at Cooper, and then you said Shayla had to do 6 more months of high school, and I could never find that person to get Shayla's paperwork, and Cooper refused to sign it. So then, therefore, in the law, Shayla had never graduated. Why? Because nobody could say she graduated. Nobody could say she didn't graduate. So I was due a credit, but they didn't want to give me that credit. They kept losing the paperwork. And as they lost the paperwork June, July, and August, and now we're arguing in August, September, October, November about the credit, they were now saying that the amount of money I owed was due them. And I'm saying, well, number one, I thought that under the law, we were recertifying my lease. And because we were recertifying it, I didn't owe rent until we had a recertification. And they said, well, you should have got a rent judge and gave the last amount of rent that you owed to her. And then they could have held that money. I said, well, nobody told me that. No lawyer that I had told me that. And I had been in housing court with Minneapolis Public Housing twice that year regarding an eviction where they kept trying to evict me. I said they were trying to evict me because I was a foster parent. And as I was a foster parent, I was licensed for 3 kids. They said I had to report every child, but every child might not be in my home for long periods of time. So then therefore I wasn't really reporting the children. I only really reported Keenan when I adopted Keenan. That was the only child I actually reported that I kept because they couldn't raise the rent based on me being a foster parent. I didn't think I needed to report the children that were in my home. I thought that the kids had privacy rights. And the state of Minnesota, through the Department of Human Services, knew these children were staying in my home. So then by rights, the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority also knew through judgment the names of these children and could get the names of their parents, because that's what they would have been getting. And they had rights, and I didn't have to disclose that to Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. So they could never count these children as being in my home. They could never charge me rent for it. When they found out that I was keeping these children and the amount of money I was making, I thought Minneapolis Public Housing Authority worked really hard to evict me, because they couldn't get any of that money that they were giving me for foster care through the rent. That's what I thought at the time, and I thought that's why they were discriminating against me, because they didn't want me to be a foster parent. Later, I thought it was because of the Office of Civil Rights complaint that I filed. That year, I filed an Office of Civil Rights complaint, 2012 December, and on 1/23/2013, me and the Office of Civil Rights began this argument where I said they hired these investigators and got my paperwork, original papers, some of them, and then they refused to give them back. They said that I needed the case numbers of the complaints that I filed, and I started giving them to them, and they said I needed $25 a page in order to get these complaints that I filed, because funds was due me again, where I could have paid the rent that was due, whether it was right or not. If I had the money, I probably would have just paid the demand, because that's what I did a lot of times. I didn't like arguing with people. But at that point, Shayla hadn't graduated, and then they put me out as my son, Michael, was in school, as Keenan was in school, and we became homeless at that point. And I wanted to sue Minneapolis Public District number 1. I wanted to sue District 281. I wanted to sue Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, and they said that I couldn't get an attorney. You're right, Amy, Jane Getz. They said I couldn't get an attorney to do that.